So yesterday I made a video on a possible DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda that might have been cancelled. At the time of making that video, there wasn't much information outside of a suspicious post coming from somebody called Sinclair Networks, which at that time was speculated to be a third-party developer contracted by BioWare to work on patching and fixing bugs for Mass Effect Andromeda. And for everything that I've said in the previous video, I will have to apologize because I jumped the gun. I just presented some information without actually waiting to see how the story unfolds, and for that I apologize. Now, according to that post, Sinclair Networks was hired by EA and BioWare to do some patchwork on Mass Effect Andromeda, but due to complications caused by the rather unsuccessful launch of the game and other problems regarding the development cycle, any future plans for a DLC would have allegedly been killed off and nothing was in the works anymore. Now, I knew and even mentioned it in the video itself that the information was delivered in a very unprofessional way and it presents very little credibility, yet it was a bit too elaborate to be a simple hoax. Not only that, but the information itself was rather compelling and in accordance with the fact that most people didn't really set their hopes too high for any future DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda, especially since it was confirmed that the team was pretty much gutted and relocated to emphasize work on the 2018 release of Anthem. What I realized after the video was already posted was the fact that there were several responses from people working for BioWare, which have alluded to the fact that BioWare never actually outsourced any of its work, especially to third-party networks going by the name of Sinclair Networks. At this point, I realized I messed up royally and should have waited a little bit longer for the story to unfold. I don't typically like to jump the gun and make assumptions until I have all of my facts straight, but Mass Effect Andromeda, even with its imperfections, really hits a sweet spot for me. The mere news that any future DLC for this game might have been cancelled was really bad news for me, especially since I invested a lot of time into this game. For this, I apologize to everyone who was misled by my previous video. But going back on topic, some producers working for BioWare have stated on Twitter that not only did BioWare never contracted any third-party networks to work on their game, but everything including patching and fixing bugs is done by the studio itself, which pretty much suggests that everything this so-called Sinclair Networks has claimed is pretty much fake and nothing more than an elaborate hoax. Now, the problem with this entire debacle is that now there are people starting to be suspicious of BioWare's statements as well, since, well, many believe they delivered false promises before and this might just be another one of their cover-ups. As for my personal opinion, I didn't really want to present it in my previous video because I wanted to see how the entire story unfolds, but I guess there's no point to beat a dead horse anymore and I'm just going to say the following. First of all, I strongly believe that there is a high possibility for a future DLC for Mass Effect Andromeda. I know it might seem like a little bit of a stretch, but please hear me out on this. The biggest argument for this is that it makes the most sense, both financially and from a gameplay point of view. BioWare needs to continue development on the game. As I've said in the previous video, Mass Effect Andromeda was received with way too much controversy to be left in the air like this, and the studio needs to prove that this won't just be a one-time game made for some quick bucks, but a continuation of a franchise that pretty much defined an entire studio. Simply put, Mass Effect as a franchise is simply too important, especially financially, for both BioWare and Electronic Arts to be left like this, in the current state that it is. Second of all, it's undeniable that ever since its release, Mass Effect Andromeda has received significant improvements, and the overwhelming majority of the patches that came out addressed a lot of the big issues that the game had. I think it's safe to assume that a lot of people have a way better opinion of the game now than they did on launch day. All of the patches released so far have improved a lot of aspects of the game, and BioWare proved that they are willing to listen to their fan base, especially since a lot of the suggestions coming from it were reflected into the patches themselves. Third of all, there wasn't a shortage of cues hinting towards a possible future DLC. We've had both in-game moments indicated to a possible Korean arc, which would make sense to come off in a form of a story DLC, but there were also people working for the studio itself, which indicated that something big is in the works. There were slight hints in the live streams as well, but then again, this might be just me reading too much in between the lines. Last but not least, the way BioWare and people working at the studio keep their lips tight seems to be too much of a nuisance to be just them not wanting to disclose the fact that the development might have been abandoned. It was already confirmed that there are going to be future patches, so we already established that the development is still going, even though at a slower pace. On top of that, when it comes to failed launch of a video game, the next best thing you can do in order to salvage the situation is damage control. The only way out for BioWare, from what I see, is for them to come out with something that can truly salvage the situation right now, and a story DLC would be the perfect candidate for them. We've seen it in the past with Dragon Age Inquisition, we've seen it with Mass Effect 3, it worked with those games, so all in all there's strong indication that this might be recurring with this game as well. They also can't say too much without hyping everything yet again. I think we've already seen the dreadful effects of overhyping, such as No Man's Sky. If BioWare was a person and I was in its shoes, I would definitely keep my mouth shut to avoid any hype whatsoever and only speak when I know I had everything in check and I can finally deliver good quality to my fans. And chances are most of you guys are probably of the same opinion as I am. Now, for the time being, waiting patiently and not getting too invested into this would be the best course of action. If you already played Mass Effect Andromeda since it's released, maybe putting it off for a bit, especially if you already finished it, might not seem like such a bad idea. If you're someone who avoided it at launch and only now had the chance to get into it, this is the best time to do it. Not only is it on sale, but it's also in its best state that it has ever been. There have been significant improvements across the board, and since not many games get released in this period, you can definitely get into this game right now. But this is just my opinion and you are free to do as you wish. Personally, I'll keep updating as more information comes out and more patches and or content gets released. In the meantime, you guys just go ahead and tell me your thoughts on this. I'm really curious to see people's opinion on the state of Mass Effect Andromeda. That is pretty much it for today, and I will see you in the next video.